Pattie Boyd is often remembered as one of the great loves in the lives of both George Harrison and Eric Clapton. She was a beautiful model in the 1960s, and her life became intertwined with two of the most famous musicians of the era. Pattie married George Harrison, the lead guitarist of the Beatles, but Eric Clapton, George's close friend and an extraordinary guitarist himself, also fell deeply in love with her. This complex love triangle inspired some of the most iconic love songs in music history, including Eric Clapton's Layla, which expressed his feelings for Pattie, even though she was married to his best friend George. The story behind these relationships is full of passion, music, heartbreak, and complications, showing how intense emotions can shape both personal lives and art. It all started in 1964 when Pattie Boyd was selected to appear in the Beatles film A Hard Day's Night. The moment George Harrison met her, he was instantly attracted to her. However, at that time, Pattie was already in a relationship with another man named Eric Swain. Despite this, after meeting George, Pattie found herself drawn to him, and she soon told her friends she had ended her previous relationship. She agreed to have dinner with George, and their connection quickly grew stronger. 2 years later, in 1966, Pattie and George got married. During the early years of their marriage, George and Pattie discovered they shared several interests beyond music. Both became fascinated with spirituality, meditation, and a vegetarian lifestyle. This shared focus helped them build a solid foundation for their relationship, and for a while their marriage seemed stable and happy. Even amidst the chaotic and hectic world that surrounded the Beatles, the band was no longer touring after 1966, which brought some relief and normalcy to their lives. Meanwhile, George Harrison's first meeting with Eric Clapton also took place in 1964. At that time, Eric was playing guitar in a band called the Yardbirds, which had been invited to open for the Beatles at a concert in London. Although all four Beatles were present, George and Eric immediately struck up a friendship, bonding over their mutual passion for the guitar. Clapton respected George's playing, and George admired Eric's deep knowledge of blues music. However, Eric saw himself more as a serious blues musician than a pop star, and he was somewhat cautious or even disdainful of commercial success that came from pop music. As he said later, by the time they met, he was deeply involved in blues and had become a purist who focused primarily on serious guitar work rather than pop stardom. Meanwhile, George, even as a Beatle and an international star, longed to be respected as a serious guitarist in his own right, much like Eric. The friendship between George and Eric developed over time, and at one point, George invited Eric to Abbey Road Studios to play on a Beatles song called While My Guitar Gently Weeps. This was remarkable because the Beatles rarely allowed outside musicians to play on their recordings, especially guitar parts that George normally played himself. This collaboration showed that George was beginning to distance himself a bit from the Beatles' commercial image and moving more toward the kind of guitar-focused, blues-based music that Eric was known for. At the same time, George was proving his talent as a songwriter. He wrote several memorable songs including Here Comes the Sun and Something. The latter was written for Pattie and is considered one of the greatest love songs ever. Frank Sinatra even called Something the best love song written in decades. Eric Clapton's career during the 1960s was very active, but his path was quite different from George's. Eric played in the Yardbirds until 1965, then joined John Mayall's Bluesbreakers briefly. After that, he formed the band Cream in 1966, alongside Ginger Baker and Jack Bruce. Cream was hugely successful and pioneered a new sound that combined blues and rock. However, the band only lasted until 1968. In 1969, Eric formed Blind Faith, but the group produced just one album before disbanding. As the decade came to a close, both George and Eric were searching for something beyond music and fame. George was deeply drawn to spirituality, especially Eastern philosophy, after traveling to India. His fascination with meditation and his spiritual guru increasingly distanced him from Pattie emotionally and physically. His interest shifted toward inner growth rather than the glamorous lifestyle of a rock star. Eric, on the other hand, sought peace and tranquility after years of intense touring and a wild lifestyle. He moved to a quiet place in Surrey called Hurtwood Edge, where he could find solitude. Musically, this period was crucial for him. He discovered the music of J.J. Cale, who greatly influenced his style. Eric also formed Derek and the Dominoes, a band he later praised as having the best rhythm section he had ever played with. Because George and Eric lived close to each other, they started spending more time together, and Pattie would often join them. It became obvious that Eric had fallen in love with Patty, especially as George was becoming more distant in his marriage. Patty found it difficult to resist Eric's attention as she struggled with the challenges in her relationship with George. Eric recorded the song Layla, a passionate and emotional expression about a man hopelessly in love with a woman who is unavailable. When Eric played the song for Patty, she described it as one of the most powerful and moving songs she had ever heard. At that time, Patty was still uncertain about her marriage to George, and Eric's musical declaration of love made it harder for her to resist him. One unforgettable night at a party in North London, George unexpectedly showed up and saw Eric and Patty talking quietly in the garden. George confronted Eric, who candidly admitted he was in love with Patty. The confrontation was intense. George demanded Patty choose between staying with him or being with Eric. Patty left the party with George, but their marriage continued to weaken. Over time, Patty and Eric met in secret more frequently, but early on she rejected Eric's proposal to be with him. After this refusal, Eric withdrew from the music world. His band Derek and the Dominoes broke up, and Eric stopped touring, retreating into a self-imposed exile from public life. He rarely left his home and avoided phone calls, struggling deeply with addiction and depression. Among his few public appearances during this period was the Concert for Bangladesh in 1971, organized by George Harrison, where Eric performed but collapsed on stage due to his fragile health. In 1973, friends organized the Rainbow Concert to try and help Eric recover. By 1974, Eric had overcome the worst of his heroin addiction, though he still struggled with heavy drinking. Meanwhile, George's solo career flourished. His 1970 album, All Things Must Pass, was a massive success, and he also organized the famous Concert for Bangladesh to raise money for refugees. However, his personal life suffered. He became increasingly involved with meditation and spirituality and had several affairs, including one with Maureen Starkey, Ringo Starr's wife. The marriage between George and Patty continued to deteriorate. During this time, Eric and Patty rekindled their friendship, and Eric again expressed his feelings for her. In the mid-1970s, Eric went on a US tour, and Patty decided to join him. This period was difficult for Patty, who felt lost and confused amid the heavy partying and drinking that were part of Eric's lifestyle on the road. The Beatles had stopped touring in 1966, and Patty had never experienced life on tour before. The constant partying was intense, and sometimes Eric would perform shows barely able to stand. Despite the challenges, Patty wanted to be part of Eric's world and stayed with him during the tour. Eventually, Eric called Patty and asked her to marry him. She accepted, and their wedding was surprisingly quick, happening soon afterward. Interestingly, the announcement about their marriage was published in a newspaper before Patty even knew, due to a friend of Eric's playing a prank by calling the press. Patty and Eric's marriage began with promise, but the problems soon returned. Eric's drinking worsened, and less than a week into their marriage, Eric asked Patty to return home from the tour. The pattern of addiction and emotional struggle continued to strain their relationship. Their emotional bond remained strong despite the difficulties, but it came to a heartbreaking end when Eric told Patty he had met someone else while in Italy and was going to have a child with her. This news shattered Patty, especially since she and Eric had been trying unsuccessfully to have children themselves. Feeling deeply hurt, Patty left Eric. The story of George Harrison, Patty Boyd, and Eric Clapton is remarkable, not only because of their personal lives, but because of the incredible music their experiences created. Songs like George's Something and Eric's Layla and Bell Bottom Blues capture the intense emotions, love, and heartbreak they lived through. These songs remain timeless classics, connecting with listeners around the world even decades later. Despite the pain and complex history, Patty has said that she, George, and Eric still see each other and remain close in some way. Their story shows how love, friendship, jealousy, and music can blend into a powerful and unforgettable legacy.